Howdy Beans, and welcome back to another exciting episode of the Howdy Beans podcast. I'm your host, Luke the Elder Bean. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're all good. As per usual, today we're going to be doing another looking back episode, another reflections episode, another episode where I look back at my first season of the podcast and I look into how I've changed, how I've grown. Basically, it's free therapy. So today we're going to be looking back at my review of Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, one of my favorite Star Wars movies. Not the favorite, to be honest, the favorite is Rogue One. But I have a lot of memories and a lot of fondness of not only doing this episode, but also this movie in general. Like, this was the introduction for me for Star Wars. But we'll get all of that into a minute. First, I want to do a bit of housekeeping because I like to keep my house nice and clean. So make sure that you follow me on Twitter. If you are listening to this on YouTube, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Same if you're listening on Spotify. Don't forget to leave me a 5-star rating and to follow me on Spotify. I'm currently at 151 followers on Spotify, so if I can get to 155, I'll be eternally grateful. You can also listen to the podcast on TikTok and Instagram for a lot more short form sort of reviews and content. Just type in Howdy Beans podcast on Instagram and TikTok and you'll find me there. So why am I looking back at season 1 episode? So for anybody that didn't check out my prior episode all the way back in February, where I look back at my review of Amelie, basically I decided, now that it's my 5-year anniversary, that I want to look back on my first season to see how I've changed, see how I've grown. Like I said, it's the free therapy. It's that idea of have I gotten better? Is the quality better? The editing and stuff like that. It's a way of just having a fun sort of look back. And actually, tell the truth, I was a bit unsure how the episode would do. But looking back at the analytics, not including YouTube, because YouTube, it just died on YouTube, to be honest. Like, everything else that I was posting was getting like 55 to like 80 views and like 4 to 5, maybe even 6 likes, which is good for me, to be honest. But that got like 2 likes and like it's currently like 10 views. So it's one of the most lowest viewed episode I've done this year on YouTube. But on Spotify and elsewhere, it's done really, really well. It's upwards of like 20 to 25 downloads at the moment, which again, on those platforms is really, really good for me. So people seemed to like it. So that's why I want to sort of carry it on. Also, again, for anybody that didn't know who hasn't listened to the episode, this isn't a standard review. I'm not reviewing Star Wars Episode 1. I am literally just looking back and reflecting on my review of that episode. So if you've looked at the thumbnail or you've read the title and you're a little bit disappointed, I do apologize. But that episode is still there. I still recommend for people to, even though they're older ones and they do make me cringe, to go back and check those episodes out. And again, in a minute, I'm going to talk about a bit more about that. So by all means, please do stick around. So you're probably asking the question, Luke, why are you looking back at your Star Wars Episode 1? Why are you looking back at this episode specifically? And the simple reason behind it is the fact of it's the only bit of Star Wars content that I've done, admittedly. And for many reasons, and I'll get into them right now. I just want to sort of set out by saying that I am a huge Star Wars fan. I love Star Wars. I grew up with Star Wars. Like, Star Wars is my introduction to science fiction. I've said this many times on the podcast before. I was really lucky to be born in 1998 at the end of the 90s and to be born when I did, because that was basically the renaissance for me of when things started to get interesting. Lord of the Rings was just around the corner. The Marvel movies like X-Men and like Fantastic Four and Spider-Man were just around the corner. Movies like Harry Potter with like the fantasy, that was just around the corner. Movies like Star Wars Episode 1, even though Star Wars had already come out in the 70s, I'd never seen it before. So my first introduction to Star Wars was Phantom Menace. And that was my first proper introduction to science fiction, which has led to me being such a huge nerd when it comes to science fiction and stuff like that. So this movie means a lot to me. And again, I watched this film as a young kid, watched it, loved it, devoured it, had it on video, watched the video till I almost ruined the video, then got it on DVD and watched the DVD religiously almost every night. I used to do Jar Jar Binks impressions. I used to do Yoda impressions. I used to want to grow up to be like Qui-Gon Jinn, which I do. I now have a sort of a Jedi cosplay that is a just like Qui-Gon Jinn's. It's brown. I have a lightsaber that costs me like 75 quid, which is like a metal hilt, makes all the sound effects and noises. You can change the color on it. I cosplay in that. I went to Comic-Con last year as a Jedi. I've watched all the Star Wars movies. I've read a lot of the Star Wars novels. I am a big fan of Star Wars, but recently, in the last, I'd say 4 or 5 years, since like The Force Awakens and what Disney have done to Star Wars and how it's treated it and how like the movies haven't been great apart from Rogue One, which was in my opinion one of the best Star Wars movies ever made. But again, that's my opinion. What Disney has done to Star Wars and like the fandom, how it's treated like actors in Star Wars and how it's treated people who talk about Star Wars. I see it all the time on TikTok and online where anybody talks about Star Wars, if they're just wrong by one little bit or they have opinion that doesn't go with the norm or whatever, they get slandered, they get hate, they get death threats. And that's one of the reasons why I actually haven't looked into any Star Wars stuff. Even though I'm a big fan and I want to talk about Star Wars, I want to talk about Episode 2, and I want to talk about Anakin's downfall, and I want to talk about Rogue One, and I want to talk about Bad Batch and Rebels and the Clone Wars, like the TV movie as well as the TV series that was brilliant, which was some of the best Star Wars has ever been, in my opinion. And I'd love to talk about some of the books as well, some of the Legends books and some of the now it's seen as canon book. I'm currently reading through the Thrawn books as well, the Thrawn Ascendancy. So, I want to do that, but what's put me off, and the reason why I actually haven't done in Star Wars content, is because of the fandom. It's rotten. Like it's horrible. It's one of the worst. Like it's really, really bad, and it's a shame because I love Star Wars so much, but I just don't feel comfortable talking about it because I just don't want to deal with any of the backlash. And that's why. If you ever look back and listen to this review, I was so happy and hopeful because at the time I was like, oh my God, yes, I want to talk about Star Wars and it's going to be great. It's going to be brilliant. And I've got so much to talk about Star Wars. I'm such a big fan. I was so sort of young and naive. And then I did that episode. And granted, I didn't get no hate. Again, I was still very small. Like there wasn't any eyes on me. So again, I literally went under the radar. But then the hate started to grow in the fandom. And I just saw it and I'm like, I'm not interested. I'm really, really not interested. And it put me off. And I was like, you know what? I can put Star Wars on the back burner and I can look into other things. And that's what I did. I looked into other things and I've never looked back, sadly. But I do want to eventually look into more Star Wars stuff now that I'm growing. Granted, I can't promise you'll get any new Star Wars stuff this year, but it is something that I want to look at in the future. And hopefully by then, all this hate and sort of gatekeeping and all that has sort of died down and stopped, or it's not as bad, and then maybe I can look into it. And there's potentiality now that I'm on TikTok and Instagram that I could do a lot of short form sort of Star Wars sort of content, looking to some episodes of Rebels and stuff like that. So there's always a possibility. This is why I set up the TikTok, so it allows me to do a lot of the short form sort of content, and then save time for the podcast to do the long form content, like stuff like this. So there's always hope. As they say, there's a new hope for the future of more Star Wars stuff from me. But specifically with this episode, I have a lot of memories with this episode. Specifically, this is the episode where I basically tried to do what the ladies at Doom Generation do and what other sort of podcasters I have heard at that time do, which is this was because I love this movie so much. I wanted to do it justice. I wanted to properly get it right. This was for me a big topic, a big movie, a big passion. So what I did, and I haven't done this before, and I haven't done this since. But I watched this movie and I wrote down notes of everything that happens, of like, okay, this happens, kind of like, again, like the Doom Generations do, where they do a play-by-play of the movie, whereas like they do every single scene and they talk about like that, which I love it, which is great. And I've done it on other podcasts when I was with like Sean from Review It Yourself, he does it. And it's great when you're with somebody else, but when you're podcasting on your own, and what I found, and the reason why I haven't done it since, is that it's really difficult. And again, because you haven't got anybody to bounce off of, and you're not taking any breaks, as I've sort of alluded to in my Amelie review, which I wasn't taking any breaks and I wasn't pausing or anything. Doing a play-by-play review of a movie like that, which is almost 2 hours long, is very taxing. So it's something that I haven't done since, because it's a lot. But I remember again, I can't find the notes, but I had reams and reams and pages of notes. I was like, oh god, mention this part. Oh, mention this bit. This bit's talking about how Anakin, has the inklings of his sort of future of him being Vader and stuff like that. And talk about this, talk about that, talk about the fact of again, I haven't listened to this episode in a while, but like talk about the fact of, yes, I know Jar Jar Binks was made for kids, but I really, really like Jar Jar Binks and I defend Jar Jar Binks and stuff like that. And how, like, talk about how George Lucas had envisioned this to be sort of a play, to be like an opera, to be this grand sort of epic, this sort of hero's journey. And, talk about these sort of things. So I have a lot of memories of doing this review and hoping that it would be good and that people would enjoy it. And it did all right, to be honest. I can't really remember any of the sort of the stats, but I remember it doing somewhat well. But again, it was my first year, so I wasn't, up to scratch or anything. I didn't actually have any sort of cards in the game. Like, people, I was like still under the radar. Like, I wasn't really known. But it's still one of those episodes where I look back and I'm like, yeah, that was the episode where I talked about Star Wars. That was the episode where, I had a huge list of things that I wanted to talk about, that I wanted to get it right, and that after, not long after I put that review out, that's when all sort of the hate bombing and gatekeeping sort of to rear its head, shall we say, in sort of the Star Wars community. And it's what put me off and why I actually haven't done any sort of Star Wars content since. And again, that's why I'm doing this reflection. So I'm interested to see what the review's like, to be honest. Like I said, I haven't listened to it since I edited it a small amount, and then I posted it, to be honest. So I'm interested to see what it sounds like. Did the quality improve? Did I manage after? Because again, this was done about a month or two, maybe even 3, after I'd done the Amelie episode. So it'd be interesting to see, had I improved? Was I more confident? Was there still loads of ums, ahs, and those sort of things? Was I able to be fluent is in getting my point across? Because again, this was a very big review for me. How does it come out? So I have got a few thoughts and feelings, and it's something that I want to look back to. Again, like I said, this is all free therapy for me, and I hope that other sort of podcasters listen to this and go and give this a go, even if they don't do an episode like this. If they just decide to listen back to their old episodes and reflect in their own time, that's completely fine as well. But like, since doing the Amelie episode, I'll be completely honest, since doing new episodes, since listening back to that one, I haven't changed completely, but I have reflected on certain things. I have reflected on, maybe I should try this, maybe I should try that. I recently did a review for a movie, which by the time this comes out, I don't know if that episode will be out yet, so I won't mention it. But I recently finished a review for a movie that's going to come out sometime in March, that I basically was like, well, I said in the Amelie episode I was going to be more spiritual, because I'm not as spiritual as I used to be. And with that episode and that theme, I was allowed to be incredibly spiritual. So I just let loose, and I was very proud of myself. And so I have learned a lot about myself, and I've sort of tried things from the past that I liked, that I missed, that I don't do. So it's been very helpful. So I do highly recommend it. But yeah, so that's sort of my sort of thoughts and feelings of the introduction to reflecting on sort of Star Wars Episode 1. I'm going to go off now and listen to my review of Star Wars Episode 1. It's going to be interesting. I think, if I remember correctly, it's a bit of a long one, admittedly, so it's going to take me a while to get through it. But once I've listened to it and once I've gone through it, again, I highly recommend you guys do the same. Go back and listen to that review with me, so you can kind of understand my thoughts and feelings in the next section, when I talk about like my thoughts, my first impressions, and how I did, and things that I liked, that I don't like, and stuff like that, things that I've improved on. So again, by all means, listen to that one with me, and then let's go off and check out my thoughts and feelings on Star Wars Episode 1. And welcome back, everyone. So hopefully, like me, you sat and listened through that episode. If you did, fair play to you, because I just did. And oh boy, talk about free therapy. I don't know. Let's sort of cut the cheese. Let's go straight to brass tacks. It was jarring. It was an easy one to listen to, unlike the Amelie one, where I'm concise. I get to the point. Like, I make a lot of good points, and I start talking about the movie. With this one, I go round the Reekin. I go round the roundabout. I take so long to get to the actual Phantom Menace review that even me now, like, 4 years later, I'm sitting there going, just get on with it. Just get on with it. So, God, to think how anybody would have thought back then, when they listen to that and go, why am I still listening to this guy? He's taking forever. Now, I understand why, because like going into the review, I generally thought, because I had forgotten that it was just a review of the Phantom Menace. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to talk about the introduction. I'm going to do the production. I'm going to talk about the cast, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm going to get straight into it as I do now. No, 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 no. This, I basically listened back to myself. I'm cringing mostly because I'm trying too hard. And what I mean by that is the fact of, and I'm trying to tap into my brain back then, 4 years ago. I was trying too hard, not to show off, but to show to people, anybody that was listening, which wasn't a lot back then, but just in case anybody listened, that I was a Star Wars fan. That's what it feels like to me, that I was trying so hard to prove to people that, oh, I like Star Wars, I'm a Star Wars fan, because every time I'm constantly referencing, I've read all these books, or I'm reading this book, I'm reading that book, I've played all these games, and then I'm name dropping characters, and like I'm talking about lore and like characters like Thrawn and that you should only really know unless you've read the books, or if you watched Clone Wars and Rebels and stuff like that. And I'm sitting there, like me now, I'm sitting there thinking, why? Pace it out. If you want to talk about Star Wars, great. Do that in later episodes. You don't have to basically blow your load straight away. Ease back a bit. Pull back. But I wasn't at all. I was trying too hard, and I could tell. Like it was really jarring. It was a difficult listen, and it's kind of a shame, really, because when I actually get round to talking about Phantom Menace, when I actually get round to talking about the movie, I make a lot of really good points. But the problem is, and again, the review is about an hour and 29 minutes, there about an hour and 30, and I don't really get into it until 35 minutes in, thereabouts. And then by that stage, I was kind of like so drawn out from me just trying so hard to prove that I'm a Star Wars fan that by the time I got to the review, even I'm listening to it, I'm like, do I care? Do I really want to sit and listen anymore? So it is so helpful to do this, because I'm looking back and go, oh my God, I'm so glad I do things differently. I'm so glad I'm not doing the same shtick now. And like, look, to be fair to myself, 4 years ago, like, it's my first proper sort of, I'm still getting to grips with the podcast. I can't be too harsh on myself because I'm still learning. We all have to learn somewhere, so we all are not as good as we are now, but it's still one of those where, like, I get why I did it, because it was Star Wars Day. It was May the 4th. So because it was Star Wars Day, I want it to be a Star Wars celebration. And I do mention that in the review. Fair play to myself 4 years ago. I do mention it's like it's a celebration. So this is where should we celebrate and talk about all things Star Wars. But I really should have advertised the episode as that then. Instead of just going, Phantom Menace review, I should have just gone, this is sort of a Star Wars celebration sort of review where I celebrate all things Star Wars. And I might go back, actually. I know it's old and nobody will probably ever listen to it, but I might go back and change the title of it, or I might not. I don't know. But I was at the end of it feeling like I need to properly go back and review Star Wars Phantom Menace Episode 1 on its own. Rewatch it, review on its own as I do now. And then start again, because my original plan was, no need to look at Phantom Menace because I've already done it. I'm going to re-listen to it. I'm going to do some reflections, and then I'm going to hopefully maybe in the future move on and do sort of Clone Wars and sort of Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith and all that. But now I'm thinking, no, I need to actually go back and do that movie justice, because I spent so long just talking about other things of Doctor Who, of other things of Star Wars, that I just didn't get to the point, and I feel like a lot of people probably would have dropped off, or if they didn't drop off, it was just very jarring. So that's my sort of first impressions going into it. I don't overly hate it. Like I said, I love everything that I make. I am proud of everything that I make. And again, to be fair to myself, as I mentioned, it is my first year podcasting. So, there are going to be moments like this. They can't all be brilliant. And again, moments like these are really, really helpful. But again, it is one of those where you look back and like, oh, there are things that I like. Like I said, I do make a lot of good points, and I am sort of proud of myself for at least giving it a go. Being the fact of, you know, granted, yes, I come off as being very sort of trying too hard and trying to show off and trying to prove to anybody that was listening, which nobody was listening at the time, that I'm a Star Wars fan. It was really helpful to notice the fact of like, look, I just the point from that, I am passionate. You know, I'm a very passionate person. If you get me talking about something that I love, like Star Wars, the Doctor, or anything like that, I'm going to talk your ear off about it. And nowadays, the difference is now is the fact that I'm a lot more sort of reined in. You know, I can waffle for days, but I have structure. I have a point. I've been doing this long enough where I know what to say and when to say it and how to say it. Whereas back then I was just like basically it's like somebody opened a tap and just left the tap running, but had no control, no nozzle. They literally just opened up the valve and it just sputtered out. And I was just talking about Star Wars and all different things. And again, that's just not good when you do a podcast, because the whole point of podcasting is that yes, you want to talk, but you want to be able to keep people engaged. And if you're not able to convey your point or get to the point in a certain manner, people are going to drop off. People are going to go, oh, I'll come back to it later. And 9 times out of 10, most people don't come back later. You know, they kind of say, oh, I'll come back later, and they never do. It's very rare that people do. And if they do, they're lost because they've been away for so long. They're like, oh, I don't know where I am. And it's a vicious cycle, basically. So yeah, these reflections are worth it because I'm going back and listening. I'm like, that makes sense. Okay, I can see where I went wrong there. And then this one, yeah, I'm left with thinking, yes, I need to sort of re-look into Star Wars and Phantom Menace and to do it properly, to do the movie justice. Even though I made a lot of good points, I feel like I need to properly go back and do that movie. Again, it probably won't be this year because this year I've got a lot of things planned that I want to do. But I will look into sort of Star Wars again. But look, it's been interesting. It really has. And it's fun because as I mentioned the Amelie one, you know, you look back and you think, oh God, I really have sort of changed and I have improved. One thing I did like that I did, and it's kind of funny that I mentioned it. I mentioned it in the Amelie one, but I actually take a lot of breaks during this one. I actually segregate the sections. You know, so even though it's quite long, I still kind of have breaks. So I have like the one section where I'm talking about my love of Star Wars, and then I take a break, and then I start talking about the Star Wars video games, and then I start talking about the books, and then I take another break, and then I start talking about the movie. And I quite like that. I don't know how I would structure it in how I do now, because I tend to have 2 segments now. So like, say for instance, if I'm talking about a movie, I'll have the first segment, which is the introduction segment, which is again, do the introduction, follow me on Twitter, all that jazz. And then I explain my memories or love or sort of the reason why I'm choosing this movie or whatever it is. And then I'll have like the production, I'll have cast, then production, and you know, or maybe even like I'll read the blurb and these sort of things, and that will be sort of the setup to give you enough information to go into the second segment, which would be the review. And I do that with my book reviews, and I do it with like TV reviews, because over my years of doing it, that's what I've managed to refine down to what works, not only for me but what my listeners like as well. So you can actually see the progression. But I have noticed that, you know, doing these segments, especially when you get to the review, I get really dry mouth a lot. So by the time I start the review to by the time I get to the end of it, I don't know if anybody's noticed this. I notice it mostly because I'm doing it, obviously. But I've noticed that when I start the review to when I get to the end, I go from being sort of, you know, really sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Not illiterate, but very sort of. Oh, there's a word for it. I can't think of it. But basically, I'm able to convey what I want to say in a manner that is understandable, sort of fresh and sort of awake is probably the better word. To when I get to the interview where I'm a bit, I don't know if you can tell that I'm getting a bit tired. I'm getting a bit sort of drawn out. I'm making not mistakes, but I'm doing a bit more ums and ahs than I would normally, these sort of things. And it's mostly just down to the fact of my mouth's getting dry. I really need a drink, and it's one of those where I could stop the recording halfway and then just cut out, or you know, or even I don't even do that. I could literally just stop talking, have a drink, and then cut out that gap in between. You know, when I do editing, you know, there are different ways of doing it, but the problem is with me when I get into a flow and when I get into sort of this like this flow state, I don't want to just stop because then once I've taken myself out of that flow, I then stuck of having to get myself back into it. And because I'm always in a constant flow, especially if I'm really enjoying it or I've got a lot to say about something, it's a bit difficult. So, it's interesting to see that I went from doing a lot of breaks to just doing the one break, and how that works for me. So, it does work. But yeah, overall with this one, like I said, it's not going to be a very deep one, but the overall really is the fact of it is quite jarring to go back and listen to this one just because I'm sitting there screaming at my phone, be like, get on with it, Luke, get on with it. Like if you want to talk about Star Wars Celebration, great. Then that episode should have been just the Star Wars Celebration, and then you should have done a separate episode which should have been Phantom Menace, to be honest, because that way you could have set up your love of Star Wars because it's Star Wars Day. It's May the 4th. So everybody's listening going, oh, Luke really knows his Star Wars and he really likes Star Wars. I am now more interested to stick around and listen so that when he eventually does do Phantom Menace down the line or the following week or whenever, I want to listen to it because, I want to see what he thinks about that movie as a whole, in part of just me going, I like this, I like that. I've been reading these books, I read those books, and just kind of trying to show off and try to prove to people that I'm a Star Wars fan. I think part of me was just in fear of facing wrath from the fandom. That I didn't want people to go, "Oh, you're not a Star Wars fan because you got this wrong and you're that wrong." I think it was just a lot of fear really going into it. I know it sounds very weird to say, but as I mentioned in the introduction of this episode, the Star Wars fandom is not a nice place, and it's probably worse now than it was back then. So I feel like I just wanted to make sure that I didn't get any wrath of anybody, that like I was correct. And as I was going back, I did remember like I did have a lot of notes around me. And I was just trying so hard to be like, look, I'm a Star Wars fan. I have a lightsaber and I have a sort of Jedi cosplay, and I go to Comic-Con, which I actually have gone to Comic-Con now. It's funny, I listened to the review and he goes, I haven't worn it yet, but I'm hoping to go. And I'm like, yeah, look, you did eventually go. You can be proud of yourself. You did eventually go to Comic-Con in your Jedi outfit, and it was brilliant, but it was hot. God, it was really hot in there. I almost died of dehydration. Like I had to sit down at one point because it's just thick. And you've got to imagine if you were inside a giant convention hall surrounded by bodies, by people, and everybody's just hot and sweaty, and especially now because I went during the winter as well, they've got the heating on. You don't realize as you're walking around, you're just cosplaying is not something for the week. It's you've got to be strong. So yeah, the point is I was trying to make, without going back into it, is the fact of I kind of wish on reflection that I split those two episodes up, and that I did Phantom Menace justice, because like I said, I feel like I made some really good points. They were just lost in the cloud of me trying so hard to prove that I'm a Star Wars fan, which looking back now and seeing how much I've changed as a person, how much I've changed as a podcaster, I have nothing to prove. I don't need to prove if I'm a fan to anybody. Just knowing in myself that I like something is enough. I don't need to show off and be like, oh, I've read all the books, I've watched all the movies, I've played all the games. I don't need to do that. Just being a Star Wars fan or a Doctor Who fan or a fan of Marvel or DC or whatever, like no matter what the fandom is, just being a fan is enough. Just because you're hardcore, if you're not hardcore, means nothing. If you've only watched the Iron Man and that's it, you're still a fan. I would still recommend to watch the other movies because they're pretty good. But if you've only seen Iron Man or you've only seen Revenge of the Sith, then that's fine. You're still a fan at the end of the day. And I wish I could just tell my sort of younger self 4 years ago that. I'd be like, look, Luke, it's okay. You don't have to show off. I know it was Star Wars Day, but, split those episodes up, do one sort of Star Wars Celebration Day and then do another sort of Phantom Menace. But that's how we learn. That's how we evolve. We look back. And again, as we're listening to it, and I'm sitting there cringing, I'm still thinking, God, this was a good idea, this was. Because as I'm listening to it, I'm thinking, this is really good for me. Because I can see what I'm doing and what I'm not doing. And also, as I'm doing right now, I'm having those thoughts while listening, thinking to myself, maybe you should have done this. Maybe you should have done that. Or maybe in the future, well, now, in the present, maybe I should try doing that instead, you know. So it is helpful. It is worth doing. I just recommend other podcasters to give this a go, um, because it is so freeing. It really, really is. And like I say, it's not an original idea. There are other YouTubers and podcasters who I'm sure have done this. I know I've seen one or two podcasters, not podcasters, YouTubers do this in the past. So it's not an original idea, but it's so good. It's so helpful. It's just funny. Um, yeah, it's one of those. It was a difficult listen to, but again, let's be honest, it was my first year podcasting. I've got to give myself a little bit I can give myself a bit of flack, but I can't be too harsh on myself because it's not fair. Because I have changed and I am a better person. I'm a better podcaster and I know what I'm doing, shall we say now. Some people might disagree with that, but I think I know what I'm doing at this point. So yeah, that's been my reflections on this episode. Really, I was about to say, my review of Star Wars Episode 1, Phantom Menace, but really it wasn't. This is more just a reflection on my love of the sort of Star Wars celebration, being a Star Wars fan, and then a bit of a sort of Phantom Menace review at the end. So yeah, I think that's what I need to put down on my reflection sheet is do Phantom Menace justice, look into that in the future, then look into all the other Star Wars movies, because at this point I don't think I care as much as I did back then. I'm like, even though the fandom's not great, I just don't care as much now. Like if I'm going to look into something, I'm going to look into it, and it's as simple as that. So yeah, do that justice. Maybe look into see how I can have breaks or not, or even find a way of having a way to like stop the recording, have a break, have a breather, have a drink of water at moments where before, for example, I've done my first impressions, my mouth's getting a bit dry. So first impressions are done, stop, have a drink of water, then press record again and onto the story. You know what I mean? Something like that. So there are different ways of doing it. I'm going to look into it. So hopefully you might see improvements, or then again, you might not see the improvements, but I will know and see the improvements. I don't know what the next episode is going to be. I haven't chosen one yet. I just wanted to do these two first to gauge the response. And like I said, the response for the Amelie one, not YouTube not included, has been pretty interesting, and people seemed quite interested in them, and they did quite well in terms of downloads and that. So hopefully this one does well. If it does, I will look into doing more of these because they're a lot of fun. I joke around to say free therapy, but it generally is. So I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to keep looking into them and see what happens. But it's all down to the fact of if you do enjoy this episode and you do want me to do more of these, and you are joined me and you're as well as me going back and listening to these specific episodes, and if you are, again, I do appreciate it. And you want to see more of these, again, let me know in the comment section down below on YouTube. There's a comment section now on Spotify as well. Let me know on TikTok. Send me a message on there, or Instagram, or Twitter, or whatever. Let me know that, Luke, I love the reflections. I want you to do more. Follow me on those platforms: TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. Twitter's a bit of a dying ship at the moment, but I'm elsewhere as well. And yeah, just follow the podcast and check out my other stuff, really, because I have a lot of fun and I like to do experimental, weird stuff like this at times, because it's not all just topics. Sometimes it is just about self-reflection, and self-reflection is the healthiest form of self-help and self-therapy. Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. Either way, the point is I'm having a lot of fun. So if you are as well, then that's a good reason to jump onto the beanstalk and to follow on with my mad craziness. Because I'm full of beans, I'm full of joy, I'm full of happiness. What you see on the tin is what you get. A load of beans. Anyway, I'm rambling on now. Thank you very much for listening. I've been your host, Luke the Elder Bean. As always, it's been an absolute honor and a pleasure to talk to you today. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and I will catch you all in the next one. Bye-bye.